In Washington, D.C., a notorious drug gang threatens an entire neighborhood. Witnesses are intimidated or killed. Even as the police and the FBI build a case against the killers, the body count continues to climb. Drug sales skyrocket as a neighborhood becomes a virtual war zone. Now the FBI must find the key to destroying a deadly gang known throughout the city as the K Street Crew.
In the 1990s, the war on drugs was in full swing. The front lines were often America's inner cities, where gangs used violence and murder to rule their empires. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. When gang violence exploded in Washington, D.C., the Metro Police and the FBI fought back. Using high-tech surveillance and tough new laws, they set out to destroy the gangs from the inside out.
Washington, D.C. In this city of monuments and museums lies the heart of American justice. The Supreme Court, the Department of Justice, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. But even our nation's capital is not immune to crime. March 22nd, 1991. 20-year-old Wendy York returns home after running errands.
Teresa!
She shares an apartment with her cousins, Teresa and Teresa Lucas. Teresa is in the living room, lying on the couch. Her face is covered with blood.
Oh my God!
Wendy runs from the apartment and calls 911. An emergency dispatcher directs units to the scene. DC Metro Police arrive at the apartment within minutes. Teresa Lucas has been shot through the head. In a back bedroom, they find another body and a child. The second victim is Teresa's sister, Teresa. She has also been shot in the head. Her child is unharmed. Police discover another baby, terrified but also unharmed. It's Teresa's child. It seems both children have been alone with the bodies for hours. A short time later, the victim's mother arrives at the apartment. Renee Brown finds the building surrounded by police.
My mind was racing, and I was trying to get in. The police were holding me back. They said, "You can't get in." I said, "This is my house. I have to go in." That was the most horrific day of my life. I will never forget it. They were very devoted and dedicated mothers. They loved their kids, and they didn't deserve to die.
Crime scene investigators process the apartment. They find no signs of forced entry. Nothing in the apartment appears to be disturbed. No valuables have been taken. There is nothing that suggests a motive for the brutal slaying. Detectives suspect the victims knew their killer.
Nothing in the bathroom there. Just take a look.
Detectives ask Renee Brown to check the apartment.
Please look around and see if you see anything.
The grieving mother is willing to do anything she can to help. Renee notices something missing from Teresa's bedroom.
The first thing I noticed was that a poster-sized picture that was there the previous night had disappeared from off the wall.
A frame is found, But a photo of Teresa's boyfriend, Sam Carson, is gone.
And I told the detective then, I said, I wonder where that picture is. And we looked in the trash in the back, and it was nowhere in the trash. So I said, whoever has that picture is the murderer.
Police contact Sam Carson to ask him a few questions.
How you doing?
He denies being in the apartment the night the two women were murdered.
Do you know that your girlfriend was killed last night?
Although Carson is a likely suspect, police have no physical evidence to tie him to the murders.
Like, where were you last night? You think you can come in?
Detectives interview people in the neighborhood.
Federal detective?
Although gunshots were fired in the Lucas apartment, neighbors claim they heard nothing.
Sure about that?
I don't
Did you happen to know the women?
No, I don't.
Two young women have died,
So you're not familiar?
and yet nobody is willing to talk about it. The double homicide catches the attention of law enforcement across the district, including the FBI. Special Agent Vince Lissy is shocked by the brutality of the crime.
Right here. You got the photos they've got from Croatian.
Agent Lissy often works undercover and must protect his identity.
It was horrific. The police had very few leads to go on. They struggled and struggled with the investigation for some time, but there were no real witnesses to it.
Without a witness, police cannot identify a suspect. Without a motive, they cannot catch the Lucas girl's killer. And without evidence, the double homicide will become a statistic. Yet another unsolved murder in a city plagued with violence. The epicenter of that violence is Greenleaf Gardens, a housing project on K Street. The drug trade has reduced the neighborhood to chaos, according to Detective Steve Kirshner.
Crack cocaine hit the city hard in '85, '86. Along with that came a lot of violence. The homicide rate went sky high. I believe it started out mostly from jealousy of who was making the most money. There were kidnappings, assaults. Just led to a very violent area.
Buyers, many of them from the suburbs, made the dealers on K Street rich. The area provided few economic opportunities, so the lure of easy money proved a powerful recruiting tool.
It was a huge moneymaker for them. And it was pretty hard to tell a 14 or 15-year-old kid, hey, listen, go to school, do all the right things, whenever they can go out on the street, sell crack and make $1,000 a day. They could buy all the things that they didn't have before because they live in an impoverished home.
With millions of dollars in easy profits at stake, competition between dealers grew fierce. Streets became borders as gangs battled over sales turf. The neighborhood was a powder keg, according to Metro homicide detective Tony Brigadini.
The area was deadly. Numbers that we have compiled over the years of the investigation show that this was probably one of the most deadly areas in the District of Columbia. It's very close to some of the government buildings in Southwest Washington, which was interesting in that there's an incredible amount of crime going on in a small area so close to a downtown business district.
The FBI and DC Metro Police formed the Safe Streets Task Force. Their job is to clean up a neighborhood that has become a war zone. Agents canvass the streets, looking for information on the gangs.
Detective Henderson, we're conducting an investigation here on a murder case? Yes, sir. What about looking at these photographs? It doesn't you recognize them for one of these young ladies?
Residents are too afraid to talk or even be seen speaking with investigators.
If you walk up to somebody's door and you knock on their door and ask to speak to them, in about 3 minutes, everybody in that neighborhood is going to know that the police are there.
Frustrated by the lack of cooperation, agents try a different approach.
Sometimes we follow people to work. We try to get them away from a neighborhood. We try to do whatever we can so that the people in the neighborhood don't know they're witnesses.
Slowly, the residents open up. They talk about drug dealers who have taken over the neighborhood.
Tell me about him.
The K Street Crew. The gang is led by Vincent Hill, a ruthless sociopath who seems to thrive on violence.
If somebody came up and irritated him for any reason whatsoever, he had no problem grabbing a baseball bat, a hammer, anything he could, and hit them with it.
Hill's money and his brutality make him the most powerful man in the neighborhood, according to Metro Detective Neil Trugman.
He compared himself to a big-time mob figure. There was no fear.
According to FBI sources, Vincent Hill runs the K Street Crew with an iron fist. Still, gang members respect him.
Vincent Hill had a reputation for being a bully, but at the same time, others looked up to him because they saw that he had money, he had nice clothes, he had fancy cars. While he's manipulating them into selling drugs, they would see him beat somebody up for not giving him enough money. So all of these things kind of led the others to look to him as somebody that you didn't want to mess with, you didn't want to challenge, but at the same time, he was a way that they could make money.
The distribution of crack cocaine carries severe penalties. A conviction could get Vincent Hill and his crew off the streets permanently.
I think they're going to start selling a lot of marijuana.
Agents launch an investigation into the gang's crack dealing. But Hill's group is already one step ahead. Before the FBI can bust the K Street Crew on cocaine charges, the gang suddenly shifts to selling marijuana.
They realized when they were selling crack cocaine, you're looking at stiff time. Selling marijuana was a misdemeanor. More than likely, you wouldn't get any time for it.
The demand is huge. Buyers pour in from the suburbs. The gang maintains its profits, minimizing the risk of jail time.
It just took off like a rocket. Everybody was making money. People were making $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a day just by selling marijuana.
Thwarted by the gang's move, the task force regroups as the dealers grow even bolder.
I would drive by in unmarked cars, and they would hold bags of marijuana up, 3 for $20, 3 for $20. And then when they finally got close enough to realize that you were a cop, they would run.
The dealers simply abandon their stashes until the cops leave. Minutes later, the dealers return to the exact same spot with a new stash and set up shop again. As business expands, the violence escalates, sometimes involving innocent victims. On August 29th, 1992, Travis Ross and 2 friends are mistaken for rival drug dealers. Ross is killed instantly. Both of his friends are critically wounded. Police interview the survivors. They say they have no idea who shot them or why. Their reluctance to answer questions is understandable. Police believe the K Street Crew has already murdered a dozen people who cooperated with authorities. What they don't know is how the gang is able to identify these potential witnesses. In 1995, Bruce Spencer is shot 5 times at point-blank range by a K Street Crew member. Somehow he survives. He is willing to identify the man who shot him. The task force immediately places Spencer in protective custody. He's registered at a D.C. hospital under the name John Doe. While Spencer recuperates, Agent Lissy and other investigators scour Greenleaf Gardens looking for the men who tried to kill him. On K Street, Agent Lissy and Detective Trugman find themselves face to face with Vincent Hill, the gang's notorious leader.
He said, look, all your witnesses are going to die, every one. Even your buddy who's in the hospital under the name John Doe, in room, and he told me exactly what room it was. And I shook my head as if I didn't know what he's talking about, but I knew exactly what he was talking about. They wanted to let us know that it was their business to locate witnesses and silence them.
Investigators are even more determined to protect their witness. But word of Hill's threat reaches Spencer. Fearing for his life, the witness refuses to help investigators.
I'm through, man. Everything's working out. Come on, it's not.
The task force is frustrated, having lost another battle in their war against the K Street crew. In the 1990s, Greenleaf Gardens in the southwest section of Washington, D.C., is a neighborhood under siege. A gang calling itself the K Street Crew has claimed the housing project as its base of operations and turned it into a killing zone. Metro Police, working closely with the FBI, struggle to link the gang to a rash of killings. Investigators know it will take more than individual murder convictions to stop the widespread violence. They need a strategy that will take down the entire gang. The Joint Task Force decides to use RICO, a federal racketeering statute that will allow them to prosecute the K Street Crew as a single, corrupt organization that sells drugs and commits murder to protect their interests. Homicide detectives re-examine dozens of cold cases, cases that were once attributed to the random violence of the projects. They search for anything that will link the K Street Crew to murder, according to Detective Tony Brigadini.
Some of the cases that we were investigating were 8 years old, 10 years old. We would have to go back and research case jackets, try to find evidence that had been collected 8 or 10 years earlier, try to locate crime scene photographs, things of that nature.
Yeah, here it is. See this car? Is that the same car?
So, in trying to build a strong case, we were dealing with very little information.
In the meantime, agents launch a covert surveillance operation to gather evidence on the gang's growing drug business. Special Agent Vince Lissy.
We wanted to show the conspiratorial nature of these guys, how they operated on the street, how they took turns selling drugs, who supplied who. And we thought that if we could have undercovers introduced to the group, that we could accomplish this.
FBI agents set up a stakeout in an apartment overlooking K Street. The landlord offers it to them free of charge. Like most of the residents of Greenleaf Gardens, he's sick of the drugs and the violence.
We got some camera equipment, video, and still photos, and we would sit up there and watch them and try to get the people on K Street's patterns down. We would see Vincent Hill out there and see how he operated.
Investigators watched the area for weeks. Once they've established the gang's patterns, they develop a plan. Most of the drug transactions on K Street are conducted with buyers in cars. To get closer to the dealers, they'll need a vehicle.
We decided the best approach was to use a pickup truck. We got the oldest, dirtiest pickup truck the FBI had. We bought some toolboxes and put toolboxes on the back of the truck to make it look like a construction truck.
The truck is rigged with surveillance cameras and microphones. Two Metro investigators, Joe Abdallah and Jim Scheider are recruited from another precinct. As outsiders, they will not be recognized by gang members. They will pose as construction workers to make drug buys. Metro investigator Joe Abdallah.
So me and Jimmy had it prearranged. If I was in any trouble or I felt my safety was in jeopardy, I was gonna run for that truck, and depending on the situation, Jimmy was gonna take off with me jumping in the back of that truck, or he would get out with his firearm.
The main target of the surveillance operation is Vincent Hill. The undercover officers expect they will have to make several buys before they can make contact with the gang leader. 5 cars carrying 2-man teams form a perimeter around the neighborhood. They stand by on their radios, awaiting Lissy's orders.
We had all this in place. We had the cars situated throughout the neighborhood. And we said, okay, let's go, let's try it.
Nobody moved until I said something.
As the officers attempt their first undercover buy, Jim Scheider knows he is heading into dangerous territory.
As soon as we turned the corner, my heart started racing. We knew that there was no turning back at that point.
Abdallah and Scheider look for a dealer, any dealer, to buy from. Then on a street corner, they spot Vincent Hill, flanked by his lieutenants. The K Street crew is out in force.
What y'all need?
Man, can I get a couple bags?
Abdallah doesn't think twice. He gets out of the truck.
And I'd asked if I could get 2 bags for $40, which meant 2 bags of marijuana, which were $50, but if I could, I'd get them for $40 a piece. An individual to my left side ran to go get them from a stash, which was on a fence line. And Vincent Hill said, no, you'll take 2 for $50. I put the money down, and then I walked away.
The surveillance team documents the entire transaction. They now have the leader of the K Street crew on videotape, personally selling marijuana to undercover officers.
Joe got from Vincent Hill the first time, and we said, wow, this is too easy. Within 30 seconds, the deal was done. Jim and Joe rolled back to the office, and we were just amazed.
The task force has been prepared to wait weeks, even months, to make contact with Hill. But it happened in less than a minute. The FBI presses their advantage. Over the next 6 months, they continue to buy marijuana directly from Hill, gradually increasing the quantity.
He approached me and we worked out a deal financially.
Each time, the sale is carefully photographed.
He was there.
He never touched the drugs.
Through the undercover buys, investigators discover that Hill controls everything that happens on the block. This becomes clear when Abdallah and Scheider try to make a purchase from someone other than Hill.
And we were getting ready to make the purchase. And there was someone hollering down the street. When we looked back, it was Vincent Hill. We went back down into the block, met with Vincent Hill and bought from him. And I think he had that kind of power in that block.
For months, the buys go on like clockwork. Abdallah is doing more than making purchases. He's building a relationship. Slowly, he gains Hill's trust and tries to get information.
I tried to get any conversations I could from him. And there were times when I'd try and draw a conversation from him where he would say, look, if the police come in the block, I have a place to run to, you don't. So tell me what you need, let's get it over with. And there were also times when I had a conversation with him about setting up weight purchases, or more than the $20 bag, what we would call wholesale quantities, like quarter pounds.
Abdallah begins buying in bulk, moving from ounces to pounds. He tells Hill he is selling marijuana at the construction site where he works.
There were occasions when he would actually front me drugs, which would mean he'd give them to me for free for payment at a later date. We had that kind of trust. And he even gave me good advice on when buying the weight. He would supply me with the smaller $20 bags. He gave me packages of those at some points, and he would tell me how to juggle it, or break it down and sell it in the quantities to my friends. And he gave me helpful hints on how to do that.
For 6 months, the operation runs smoothly. Then, a routine buy puts everyone on guard.
At one point, when I made a buy from him, I got back into the truck, and Jimmy was driving, and I was in the passenger seat, and Jimmy said, "Hey, he's waving at you." And he was motioning like to roll the window down. So I rolled the window down, and he said, "Hey, look, these guys over here, they're saying that your buddy's a police officer." He said, "I know you're okay," but he said, "Those guys over there will kill you."
Somebody tell me what's going on, please.
Yo, I know y'all can't play me like that, right?
And it threw us off a little bit, and then when we started to leave, the guys that he was pointing to had like hoods over their faces and put their heads away from us.
It does not appear to Abdallah and Scheider that Hill suspects they are cops. So they continue the operation. A week later, the two detectives pull into K Street. Vincent Hill is there.
Hill was cold to me, didn't want anything to do with me. He said he didn't know where they sold marijuana, didn't know what I was talking about. And it was very confusing, because even when he was angry and sold, he was just in a hurry. He'd say, "What do you need? Hurry up and get out of here." But on this day, he's like, "I don't have anything. I don't know what you're talking about. You can go somewhere else."
Hill sends them to another dealer down the block. That night, Abdallah meets the dealer in an abandoned house. The officer prepares for a confrontation.
The gentleman walked into a vacant house, called me in.
Safe up here?
The gentleman tried to give me like a sandwich baggie full of lawnmower clippings. It wasn't real marijuana. So it was that point, we knew something was wrong.
Abdallah knows their cover is blown. With backup cars at least 2 minutes away, he slowly talks his way out of the building. The undercover operation is over. After 6 months of drug buys, the task force still does not have enough evidence to put Vincent Hill and his gang in prison once and for all.
Had we charged him with the drug conspiracy alone, it might have gotten them 10 years, maybe 5 years. And what's even worse, they wouldn't have been held accountable for all the violent crimes they committed. So we still needed to investigate the murders and the robberies and the kidnappings and all the violent crimes that were associated with that group.
Investigators still have a lot of work to do. In the meantime, the streets rage with violence. In Washington, D.C., a lengthy undercover operation has begun to produce results. Investigators have videotaped the infamous K Street crew selling drugs. But now, they must find evidence of the gang's more violent activities. In 1995, a brave young woman steps forward.
So what would you like to tell
Chrissy Gladden is 19 years old.
that you can share with us?
As a single mother, she is worried about her neighborhood.
Okay.
We know you're scared. These are scary.
Chrissy tells police that Jerome Martin and Antonio Knight are responsible for a drive-by shooting. She overheard Martin talking about it. Although she doesn't know the victim's name, her description of the crime leads investigators to an unsolved murder. 6 months earlier, Travis Ross had been killed in a drive-by shooting near K Street. Two of his friends were critically wounded. Chrissy wants to testify against the gang. She knows they are the reason her neighborhood is so dangerous.
I just overheard a conversation between Jerome.
Still, she's afraid. She tells investigators that if she speaks out against the K Street crew, they will kill her. Chrissy Gladden and 2 other women finally agree to testify, but only if the FBI places them in the Witness Protection Program. Special Agent Vince Lissy.
We finally convinced Chrissy, as well as these other female witnesses, that we would work with them. We would try to keep them safe and make sure nothing happened to them. We stressed upon them not to tell people where they lived, not to take people to their new apartments.
Chrissy's cooperation pays off. Crew members Jerome Martin and Antonio Knight are indicted for murder.
Alrighty. Pull the slide up to your bicep. There you go.
Lissy believes they have enough evidence to get a conviction. Even though 1 witness is recanted, 2 others, including Chrissy, are still willing to testify.
It's not a big deal.
The week before the trial of Jerome Martin, we're constantly re-interviewing witnesses, talking to them, getting them ready to testify. We want them to know what questions they're going to be asked if they take the stand to testify. And the week before, we had Chrissy in the U.S. Attorney's office. We got her ready. She pretty much knew what was going to be expected of her. She wasn't an eyewitness to the murder, but she did fill in certain gaps.
Don't be scared.
4 days before the start of the murder trial, Vince Lissy receives a call from one of the witnesses.
I'll set it up. She was frantic, screaming, crying, telling me, they killed Chrissy, Chrissy's dead. And I couldn't believe it. And then whenever I realized what she was talking about, it was like somebody punched me in the stomach.
Agent Lissy drives over to the Southwest District. At the crime scene, Metro Police tell him what happened.
Get that marked right away. Let's call forensics.
According to witnesses, Chrissy attended a party on 37th Street at the home of Antonio Knight's girlfriend. As she left the party, 2 gunmen appeared and opened fire. By the time police arrived, Chrissy was already dead. Not surprisingly, investigators are unable to find a single witness willing to identify Chrissy's killers. The message from the K Street crew is clear. Talking to the police is a death sentence.
Chrissy thought that everything was fine. She trusted her friends, she trusted the people in that neighborhood, thought she could go back there and nothing was going to happen. That was probably the worst I've ever felt in this job. It's hard. It's hard to keep going sometimes when that happens.
Still, the task force pursues their case against Jerome Martin and Antonio Knight. The trial is a disaster.
The case had lingered in the system so long in D.C., we said, we got to go. And we went forward with it, and we did the best we could. Some witnesses were just physically unable to testify. They were just distraught. But you know, we went forward and we lost.
Jerome Martin and Antonio Knight are acquitted due to lack of evidence. To the K Street crew, witnesses like Chrissy Gladden are a minor inconvenience.
It was really something to see these guys go free. And at that point, they won the battle. They were happy. They won the battle. And I told myself, you can't sit back and let them continue to win these battles.
Chrissy Gladden's death and the acquittal of Martin and Knight are major blows to the investigation. The task force refuses to give up. Somehow, they will find a way to bring the K Street crew to justice. In Washington, D.C., the K Street crew is terrorizing a neighborhood with drugs and violence. Investigators spent months working with 19-year-old witness Chrissy Gladden, who agreed to testify against them. On October 5th, she was gunned down outside a party. Even without witnesses, Detective Steve Kirshner is determined to find her killers.
We stayed on it. trying to find a break in that case. And we did everything we could. We printed up flyers, offered a reward. It really crushed the investigators on the case, especially Vince.
It's horrible. It's just, you know, part of you says, what more can I do? That's it. You want to wave the white flag. But the other part of you says, wait a minute, I'm not going to give up. You know, I'm not going to give in to their ways of justice. It's not the way it's supposed to be.
Less than a month later, the FBI and DC police get an unexpected break in the case. Robert Butchie Smith, a senior K Street crew member, is arrested for drug dealing. In an effort to get Smith to talk about the gang, the FBI tells him he faces federal racketeering charges. They're building a RICO case that will tie the gang's drug business to a series of murders. The tactic works. Smith finally agrees to talk.
Tell us what you know.
Smith reveals that the gang uses private investigators to identify people willing to testify against them. They also use the Freedom of Information Act to obtain court documents to target potential witnesses. Smith gives investigators leads on several unsolved kidnappings, shootings, and murders, according to Metro Detective Tony Brigadini.
He had very specific, protected information of the crimes and the business dealings that the members of the K Street crew participated in.
Smith specifically mentions a triple homicide that his nephew, William Sweeney, told him about. Sweeney, along with Sam Carson and James Montgomery, are fellow members of the K Street crew. Smith said Sweeney and Carson were in Las Vegas when Ryan Pierce, another drug dealer, won big at the tables. The two men decided to rob Pierce when he returned to D.C. On November 17th, 1996, Sweeney, Carson, and James Montgomery waited outside his home. Pierce arrived late that night, along with 3 friends. The K Street crew made their move.
What's up, man? What's this, man? Where money at? No, where money? Get over here. Get over here. Get over here. Get over here.
Pierce told the gunman he had already put his winnings in the bank. There was no cash in the house.
Man, this is crazy, man. I don't have no money in, man. Wait.
Sweeney killed both men. One woman tried to flee, but was shot to death. Another woman managed to hide until the killers left.
Get out of here, my son. Let's get out of here.
According to Butchie Smith, the K Street crew usually kills people in response to a threat. But Pierce's murder was different. This time, it was all about greed.
My nephew, Sweeney.
Investigators hope that Smith's inside information is the break they need to finally bring down the gang.
At that point, then we knew, okay, now we can start to get the framework of an indictment ready so that we could go and start to prepare charges against these guys for crimes other than the drugs.
Smith agrees to become an FBI informant in exchange for a reduced sentence. It's a risky decision.
I'm dead. I'm done.
If anyone finds out he's talking to authorities, Vincent Hill will have him killed. Technicians analyze a single fingerprint found on a screen door at the murder scene. It matches Sweeney's prints, corroborating Butchie's story.
What also helped us was we got William Sweeney's cellular telephone records. And some of the people working the case began to go and investigate that. And they contacted the cell phone company and found out that the cell phone was used near the scene of the triple murder at the time of the murder.
Investigators moved quickly to neutralize Sweeney. In April 1997, he is arrested on unrelated charges. While awaiting trial in jail, Sweeney receives a copy of his own arrest warrant from his attorney. An unnamed source is listed as an informant against him. 2 months later, just when it looks like the task force is about to put an end to the gang's operation, Robert Butchie Smith is gunned down in broad daylight. The FBI informant has been shot a total of 13 times, mostly in the head.
When Butchie got killed, it brought back all these feelings and the memories, and you know, it's hard. It's hard to keep going sometimes when that happens. Much like Chrissy's murder, there were no leads. Although many people were out on the street and saw it that day, nobody would come forward, nobody talked.
Butchie Smith's murder threatens to unravel the case against the K Street crew. Investigators have lost their only informant. The brutal killing scares away other potential witnesses.
After Butchie's murder, we sat around looking at each other like, what do we do now? Where do we go from here? It really took a lot of the wind out of our sail.
Where are you stopping?
We had to figure out how we can continue with the investigation. Where were we going to go? We thought, okay, we can follow up with the leads Butchie gave us, but still, we needed somebody on the inside, and we no longer had Butchie to give it to us. We had to gather around and tell ourselves, we can't let this get us down. We can't stop.
In 1997, the FBI's case against the notorious K Street crew was in trouble. The only informant had been murdered, gunned down in cold blood. Other potential witnesses are terrified they'll meet the same fate. Before he was killed, FBI informant Butchie Smith told investigators that James Montgomery was one of the men responsible for a triple homicide. Montgomery is arrested and brought in for questioning.
Mr. Montgomery, interesting. You got like
Special Agent Vince Lissy pressures the suspect to talk about the triple homicide and the rest of the gang's crimes. Montgomery is already facing a long prison term for the murders.
You want to tell me about anything that you know?
In the end, he decides to cooperate. Montgomery admits his role in the triple homicide. He also confesses to 7 murders, including that of cooperating witness Chrissy Gladden. Lissy presses for more leads on crimes committed by the gang. Montgomery reveals that crew member Sam Carson killed informant Butchie Smith.
What else you know about Carson?
Then he drops a bombshell.
He told me, do you remember when the 2 girls got killed? And I asked him, which 2 girls? And he said, the ones back in the early 90s. I knew exactly what he meant.
Montgomery is referring to the unsolved murders of Teresa and Tarita Lucas.
And he began to tell me about it, and I just couldn't believe it.
What do you want, Sam?
I just want to come in and talk to you for 1 or 2 minutes.
According to Montgomery, Sam Carson had stashed a bag of guns at the home of his girlfriend, Teresa Lucas. When he asked her to return the guns, Teresa claimed she didn't have them. She didn't want them around her children, so she threw them away.
Can I use the bathroom real second, please?
Carson was furious. He decided to confront Teresa one final time. Carson hid his handgun in the bathroom. He tried to calm Teresa's fears by showing her he was unarmed.
You know what this is about. I want my guns, Teresa.
He began again to ask her, where's my gun? I need my gun. Where did you put him?
No, nobody has them, Sam. I just threw them out.
I want them right now.
No, Sam, there are children in the house. I
I want my guns.
And she gave him an answer that wasn't satisfactory.
All right, you want me to go? Just go. You want me to go, right? I get out.
He went back to the bathroom, retrieved his gun.
That's for the wrong person, Teresa.
Sam.
Get the gun.
Sam.
Killed her. Sam walked into the bedroom, and as Teresa was waking up and starting to sit up in bed, he shot and killed her.
According to Montgomery, Carson got rid of any evidence that linked him to the crime scene.
Took his time. When he was satisfied that he had removed any photos, wiped all his fingerprints, he walked from the apartment, got in the car, and left.
Investigators asked Montgomery how the crew had discovered the identities of two undercover police officers, Joe Abdallah and Jim Scheider. Montgomery admits that someone from the other side of town recognized them as law enforcement and told Vincent Hill.
No, there was this girl.
Although Hill didn't believe it at first, he soon became suspicious, according to investigator Joe Abdallah.
Yeah. Back in the
On a
90s.
subsequent buy we made after that day, they followed us in the truck as we left and followed us back to the FBI building where was our meeting spot after the buys took place. And that's the date they quit selling to us.
Lissy isn't taking any chances with this witness. He decides to move Montgomery out of state for his own protection. In the fall of 1997, Montgomery pleads guilty to 7 murders. As part of the plea agreement, the court seals details of his sentence and whereabouts.
Sam Carson, FBI, I have a warrant for your arrest. Put your hands on your head now.
Police arrest Sam Carson and charge him with the murder of Teresa and Tarita Lucas. William Sweeney, already in jail on unrelated charges, is indicted for the triple homicide.
Hands up! Get him up now! Hands up!
With Montgomery safely hidden, law enforcement begins to dismantle the K Street crew's infrastructure. Jerome Martin, Sean Coates, and gang leader Vincent Hill are arrested in the summer of 1998. A federal indictment charges the gang with 13 murders, 87 counts of racketeering, drug distribution, kidnappings, and robberies. A federal judge permits recorded testimony from Chrissy Gladden and Robert Butchie Smith to be introduced at trial. Even in death, the gang's victims point a finger at their killers. In 2001, every gang member charged with murder is convicted. They receive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Gang members not accused of murder plead guilty to charges ranging from kidnapping to drug trafficking.
There's no doubt in my mind that if these guys stayed on the street, they would have continued doing what they were doing. That was their life. They knew how to sell drugs, how to rob people, how to kill people.
Thanks to the tireless efforts of both the FBI and DC Metro Police, K Street is now a safer place to live. Blazing fires, raging adrenaline, and total anarchy, all within the walls of a federal prison. FBI tactical teams and negotiators work around the clock, trying to avoid a small-scale war and keep nearly 100 hostages alive.
the 1980s, the federal penitentiary in Atlanta housed some of the country's most notorious prisoners. 1,800 Cubans fleeing Castro's regime. 400 were hardened criminals. 200 were insane. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. Castro called them undesirables. The U.S. government called them detainees. In 1987, they staged a bloody revolt. Now the FBI and special operations teams must infiltrate a burning prison to stop the violence before it rages out of control.
Cuba, 1980. A plummeting economy and political unrest prompt Fidel Castro to allow Cuban citizens to leave the country. For the first time in history, the notorious dictator permits American boats to enter Cuba's Mariel Harbor. In a 5-month period, over 120,000 undocumented refugees flee the country, heading for Florida. 2,700 are considered criminals or mentally ill under U.S. law. The Attorney General instructs the Bureau of Prisons to find space for them in America's already overcrowded prison system. 1,000 Cuban refugees are sent to the Federal Detention Center in Oakdale, Louisiana. Nearly 1,400 are transported to the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary. For 7 years, the U.S. and Cuban governments negotiate to send the criminals and mentally ill refugees back to Cuba. On November 20th, 1987, the State Department strikes a treaty with Cuba. Over 2,700 Cuban detainees will be sent back. Within 24 hours, Cuban detainees in both prisons get news of the decision. In Oakdale, Louisiana, 1,000 of them riot, taking 28 prison guards hostage. But at the Atlanta Penitentiary, all is quiet. Warden Joe Petrovsky.
There was a trust between the detainees and the correctional officers, and that trust was basically the treatment that the detainees got from the correctional officers.
Early Monday morning, 3 days after the treaty is signed, prison employee Ted Manier arrives at work. He notices an eerie silence.
There were hardly any inmates in the breakfast area. And normally it would be full of inmates were making a lot of noise and talking, and there was hardly anybody in there, so it was really quiet, unusually quiet.
On the first floor of the Prison Industries building, detainees make mattresses. On the surface, it looks like business as usual. But in an instant, detainees overpower their guards and ignite fires. On the third floor of the Industries building, Manier and his supervisor oversee a furniture-making shop. In a matter of minutes, the riot spreads to the rest of the floors.
It sounded like a roar, and it was coming up the stairwell. They got the door down, and they just came running in, and they had these hoods over their head, like they were made out of gray t-shirts or gray sweatshirts, and they just had holes poked out for their eyes so they could see.
Manier tries to report the emergency, but he is attacked by one of the rioters.
And I don't know if he was trying to hit me or just the telephone out of my hand. He knocked the phone out of my hand that went across the room.
Prison employees are facing their worst nightmare. Although they are well aware of the risks, they never thought it would happen to them.
But we did realize there was a threat, but I guess you think you can control it. When you work with inmates, you get used to them, and sometimes you forget who they really are.
The guards and factory workers are helpless. Unarmed and outnumbered, they face rioters carrying homemade weapons. The staff member notifies Warden Petrovsky of the crisis.
Inside the wall, nobody carried weapons. The inmates always vastly outnumbered the staff. So if we had weapons in there, we could lose those weapons. The only weapons that we had was weapons in the tower.
Petrovsky alerts the FBI and the prison's regional director.
I try to give him an assessment of exactly what transpired and brought him up to date.
As fire spreads throughout the industries building, the detainees force the guards and employees into a tool cage and lock the door.
We kind of thought that unless there was some miracle, that we would probably just burn up because there's no way to get out of one of the cages.
The riot spreads throughout the entire penitentiary complex. Enraged detainees capture guards, taking keys as they take hostages. They begin to release the regular prison population from their cells. The riot is beyond containment. The detainees now control most of the central buildings. Rioters attempt to gain access to the main cell block, but guards lock down the sally port just in time. As flames and smoke engulf the massive prison complex, nearly 100 guards and employees are trapped inside. Built at the turn of the century, the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary is the largest penitentiary in the United States.
It was a fortress inside that was surrounded by a wall. It raised from the ground approximately 40 feet, and the width on the top of the wall was approximately 3 yards wide. So it was a massive, massive wall.
Show me what you got.
The penitentiary is built on 300 acres of land, with 28 acres of property inside the walls.
Okay, well, we've got guards.
Warden Petrovsky needs to figure out exactly where his people are located inside the complex.
We had staff members in 11 towers that had very good observation over the entire outside compound, who logged those employees that they recognized in those areas. We started a list of the officers that we thought were hostages.
Ted Manier and his colleagues are trapped inside an equipment cage in the burning industries building. Several rioters try to convince the Cuban detainees guarding the cage to unlock the door.
They were trying to talk the guard into opening the door because they wanted to get us out and kill us or do whatever. So the guard had to tell them that they couldn't open the door, and occasionally they would push one off for getting a little wrestled.
But the raging fire threatens to destroy the building. So the rioters are forced to move their hostages to another part of the prison complex. The only route takes them across the yard in clear view of the towers. A tower guard spots what he believes are detainees threatening prison employees.
There was a guy that was up ahead of me, and he got hit. I remember seeing him. He was a Cuban. He got hit right behind the ear.
One of the hostage takers is killed, and 5 others are wounded.
I was getting worried because the bullets were going pretty close around where we were.
Chaos reigns as guards and detainees run for cover.
They ran us across to the corner of the building where they couldn't shoot at us. And that time they took us in the chapel.
Detainees force their hostages into a small room and lock them inside. Less than an hour after the riots begin, FBI agents from the Atlanta field office arrive at the penitentiary. The FBI has jurisdiction over criminal matters in all federal prisons. Warden Petrovsky briefs Weldon Kennedy, the special agent in charge.
The first thing that I wanted to accomplish was to find out how many hostages had been taken, how many might be injured, what was the threat to those people who were in fact taken hostage. All of these people were like on an emotional high. I mean, they'd been prisoners for literally 8-10 years. Some of them serving life sentences, and now they're free to roam around the prison. It was like a holiday.
This is the area where they...
Agent Leon Blakeney heads the Atlanta FBI SWAT team. Agent Blakeney appears in silhouette to protect his identity.
Nobody really knew what area that the inmates controlled, and they really didn't know how many hostages were taken.
You had 2,500 people housed in that institution.
Here's the administration.
There were people running around all over the place, and quite frankly, it was chaos.
Chaos that had already turned deadly. As agents Kennedy and Blakeney develop their plan to retake the prison, they receive critical intelligence from two sources. From FBI agents posted outside the walls of the prison complex, and from prisoners inside the walls who don't want any part of the riot.
We began to learn who the hostages might be, where the detainees were holding up, how many were there, what kind of weapons they might have.
The detainees have taken the guards' radios, compromising prison communications. Agents and guards switch to a secure frequency.
2 white males and 2 black males.
The situation is grim. Negotiations will be critical to resolving the standoff. Special Agent D. Rosario, an FBI negotiator, opens up a dialogue with the rioters.
Unreasonable demands are being made. The hostage takers want things done now. And that's why it is so important to try to bring them down to a level where they can be reasonable. Can you negotiate with people at that very high emotional level? Generally speaking, no. So we had to give it time.
The rioters are emotionally charged, angry over the shooting death of a detainee.
This theme came up time and again. You killed one of ours. You had no reason to, and you killed him. And they wanted me to see the bodies, so I had the body brought out to where we were. I looked at the body. They wanted me to get emotionally involved with them. And these 4 that originally came out to talk to me really were only speaking for themselves. They were not speaking on behalf of the 1,400 that were in there.
In the command post, Warden Petrovsky receives a frantic call from 16 employees who have barricaded themselves in cell block E. E block is home to the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary's most dangerous criminals.
These particular group of inmates were locked away in E to keep them from harming someone.
If the detainees get into cell block E and free the inmates, the lives of all 16 employees will be in danger. The E cell block is also home to the prison system's most notorious inmate, Thomas Silverstein.
A number of people in the Bureau of Prisons told me that he singularly was the toughest prisoner they believed that the Bureau of Prisons had ever housed or had in their custody. He was just an absolute animal, and he hated everything to do with the Bureau of Prisons or any of their staff.
Silverstein was incarcerated in 1975 for a bank robbery. Years later, he was sentenced to multiple life terms for fatally stabbing an inmate and a prison guard.
Thomas Silverstein was cold and he was a killer. He had two things on his mind: to escape from jail because his crimes were such where he was going to die in jail. And the other objective was to kill people. It was as simple as that.
The guards in cell block E are in grave danger. Special Agent Kennedy works with the FBI SWAT team to come up with a plan to rescue them.
The SWAT analysis was that they believed that they could go over the wall out of view of the rioting detainees and retrieve those people out of that building successfully.
The SWAT team will need ladders to get over the 40-foot-high wall. Special Agent Blakeney calls on the Atlanta Fire Department and a National Guard helicopter crew to help carry out the plan.
We put a helicopter up on the opposite side of the prison to attract their attention and at least have some diversion.
Chief, here's the situation. We've got a hostage crisis.
7 hours after the riot began, the FBI SWAT team launches a daring mission to rescue 16 prison employees without endangering the lives of nearly 100 hostages.
Listen, we need to put a truck up on the southwest corner with the ladder up. Everybody got it?
7 hours after a riot breaks out at Atlanta Federal Penitentiary, an FBI SWAT team launches a mission to rescue 16 employees barricaded in one of the prison's cell blocks. FBI Special Agent Weldon Kennedy knows that if the rescue attempt is seen by rioting Cuban detainees, it could spell disaster.
They would not hesitate to kill hostages if it became apparent to them that we were going to try to retake the prison or retake any part of it.
After scaling the wall, the FBI SWAT team approaches cell block E, home to the prison's most dangerous inmates.
Guard, come out, guard! Guard, now!
SWAT rushes the prison employees out of the building.
Keep your head down. Identify yourself when you get down there.
Across the prison yard, 27 employees, afraid for their safety, have barricaded themselves inside the prison hospital. Frustrated, they watch as their colleagues are escorted to safety. FBI SWAT team leader Leon Blakeney.
You know, they're screaming, frantic, you know, come and get us, come and get us.
The director of the Bureau of Prisons urges the FBI SWAT team to go back for the hospital employees.
The SWAT personnel informed me that there was a 100% probability that they would be detected going over the wall to try to effect a rescue of the hospital people.
We can't protect the other hostages that are being held in other parts of the prison. And my concern was if in fact we were observed, then they would start killing the other employees.
Blakeney wants to rescue the hospital staff, but knows it's a risk he cannot afford. The detainees break into cell block E and release the inmates. Vicious criminals run free, including Thomas Silverstein, a ruthless killer. As darkness falls, 3 buildings have been consumed by fire. Nearly 100 guards and employees have been taken hostage or have barricaded themselves inside the prison. Prison employee Ted Manier is being held inside a room in the prison's chapel.
So a man came up to the window, and he wasn't a Cuban. And the guy beside me said, "That's Silverstein." And he came inside, and he had a flashlight, and he started shining his flashlight. He shined the light on me, said, "Don't I know you?" told him, no. I said, I never seen you before. And he said, you don't know who I am? He looked worse than anything I've ever seen in any type of movie or anything. And when you look at him, you know he isn't a normal. There's something strange about him. He's really scary.
Detainees finally distract Silverstein and he leaves without harming the hostages. On day 2 of the standoff, FBI Tactical Commander Danny Colson arrives at the prison.
You could hear this huge roar. It was like a million bumblebees. You could almost feel the energy of those rioting prisoners.
Colson started the FBI's hostage rescue team, an elite counterterrorism group in 1982. The HRT is law enforcement's equivalent to the Navy SEALs or the Army's Delta Force.
The only unit in the United States that has a sophisticated explosive or thermal breaching capability is the FBI's hostage rescue team.
But the HRT is already tied up, handling the riot at Oakdale.
So I was going to a very difficult tactical assignment without the team I was used to commanding.
Despite not having the hostage rescue team available to him, Colson must still develop a full-scale tactical rescue plan. He faces several obstacles.
A prison is built to keep bad guys in. You have barred doors, you have steel gates. Well, these same type of things keep a rescue force from getting in. I needed help from the military, primarily from the Delta Force.
Delta Force is the Army's Special Operations Unit, but using them at the prison would be illegal.
A posse comitatus law was passed right after the Civil War, and that law prevents the military from being involved actively with their personnel in civil law enforcement.
Barring approval from the White House, the FBI must rely solely on civilian law enforcement. Weldon Kennedy assembles over 400 SWAT members at the prison.
We had SWAT teams from all around the country, Chicago, New York, as well as, of course, the immediate surrounding area.
We figured that based on the capability we had, we were probably maybe an hour away from getting in to rescue the hostages. We were all concerned that they started killing hostages. We were helpless to get in there. And that's one of the reasons that De Rosario and the other negotiators were working so hard to try to get somebody to talk to calm the situation down.
But the negotiations are not going well. None of the rioters De Rosario has spoken with has enough power to influence the detainees. The negotiators need a different approach.
We could be here for a very long time unless we come up with a group of people in there among the detainees that can speak basically for, if not all of them, for the majority.
Rosario asks prison employees which detainees command the most respect.
Files of these people were opened to us, and we looked at several of them, and we decided on 5 or 6 men. We went to the grading and called them by name, and they came to the grading, and we invited them to come over to our side and sit down at a table with us and talk with us.
The detainees agree to talk with negotiators.
And we began our first serious conversations in terms of how can we resolve this? What is it that you're looking for? The number one demand that they had was that ultimately the Immigration and Naturalization Service conduct individual hearings for each and every one of them to remain in the United States.
It's a straightforward request. Rosario agrees to pass it on to the Department of Justice. As the meeting ends, the negotiator uses a bit of psychology to help solidify the group's standing as leaders within the prison.
We decided to give these men the mail that had accumulated since before the riot began.
In the penitentiary, daily mail is an important link to the outside world.
They went back in there, and we could literally hear the shouting of glee when these guys showed up with 2 bags full of mail. We believe it created in the minds of the others that these guys could get things done for them. And that's where it began. After that, we kept asking for the same men.
Rosario is beginning to make progress, but negotiations go slowly. In the prison hospital, 27 trapped employees are out of time. Detainees are trying to break down the door of the hospital with a battering ram. The employees call Warden Petrovsky in the command center. Warden Petrovsky relays the information to Weldon Kennedy. Detainees could break through the hospital doors at any moment.
We had 27 people in there, and there was concern that once the hospital was taken over, they might be injured or even killed. So the ram is going, we can hear it as a matter of fact, banging the metal doors of the prison.
Bureau of Prison officials worry about what could happen if detainees get access to the drugs and narcotics stored in the hospital.
What about right here?
Weldon Kennedy asks HRT Commander Danny Colson for a second assessment.
I said, yeah, we can get them out. We can go over the wall. We can defend the area with a perimeter and slide them out over the walls, and we're out of there.
Colson's biggest concern is that the detainees are watching news coverage of the riots.
Inmates were watching TV to see what we were doing as much as they could. And they could very well believe that a rescue of the entire prison was underway, and then they could start executing the hostages.
Hospital workers are moments away from becoming hostages, or worse.
So here we have a huge dilemma. Do we go in and take those people out of the hospital and save them, or do we let them be taken hostage?
Kennedy decides a rescue is too risky.
My decision was based on all the information that I had. We will not go for the rescue. I will not authorize the rescue.
And when he went back in and announced it to the Bureau of Prisons, I remember one Bureau of Prisons official storming past me and looking at me and said, if those are FBI agents, you'd go get them. And I said, no, he wouldn't.
Weldon Kennedy wonders if he has just signed a death warrant for 27 innocent people. For 2 days, a riot rages at the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary. Dozens of Cuban detainees now control the prison. 27 Bureau of Prison employees are trapped in the prison hospital. Weldon Kennedy, special agent in charge of the FBI's Atlanta field office, makes a tough decision.
If we entered the penitentiary, if we tried to retake it, there was a threat they were going to immediately kill them all.
Kennedy decides not to launch a rescue mission. 2 hours after the decision, communication is lost with the employees in the prison hospital.
It's the warden. Pick up if you hear me.
I knew that if anything happened to any one of those 27 people, that I would forever live with that as being the person responsible.
Guards stationed at the prison towers gather intelligence as detainees move hostages across the prison yard. One guard calls the FBI command post with a disturbing development. A group of detainees is dragging acetylene tanks into a basement where they can access the prison's utility tunnels. Danny Colson is the FBI's tactical commander at the scene.
They might be able to bring those tanks, get enough of them underneath our command post where the tunnels ran, and caused an explosion which would have decimated the command post and maybe allowed them to escape.
Colson and the FBI SWAT team prepare to go down into the tunnels.
The tunnels were designed for two purposes. One is all the utilities went through the tunnels, the steam pipes, the electrical pipes, and they were big tunnels. There were also ventilation tunnels that started big enough for a man to walk in standing up and ended up only a few inches high.
Colson and SWAT team leader Leon Blakeney have no idea what they will encounter once they are inside. Prison maps aren't reliable, and communication with agents above ground is not possible. As the team makes their way through the underground maze of pipes, they encounter a group of detainees. Leon Blakeney.
Once we got in the tunnels, we discovered then that in fact the Cubans were in there.
And oftentimes we'd come in very close proximity to them, within 10 feet of them. There would be a bunch of them, and we'd confront them, and fortunately, every time they'd turn around and run.
The SWAT team is unable to find the acetylene tanks in the vast underground system, but they are convinced the detainees are exploring the tunnels for a possible escape route.
We decided that the tunnel system was a real threat to the successful resolution of the crisis.
Ultimately, we were able to station SWAT teams down there. The Chicago SWAT team handled one part of the tunnel system, and the Washington Field Office SWAT team handled another part of the tunnel system.
On day 3 of the standoff, Danny Colson receives intelligence from agents with high-powered binoculars positioned around the prison. The detainees have moved nearly all the hostages to a building known as the American Dorm. Colson begins to formulate a tactical rescue plan.
What do you think what can it...
Outside the prison, crowds gather. Families of the hostages, the prison guards, and even the detainees wait for information about their loved ones. The media covers breaking news from the penitentiary.
There was hundreds of media people there. There were networks, there was local TV. They established a tent city right across the street from the prison.
A single reporter and a simple error threatened to bring the standoff to a violent end. Special Agent D. Rosario.
The New York SWAT team was coming off shift, and the Chicago SWAT team was coming on shift, and they passed each other right at the steps of the administration building. And it looked impressive because there was two very large groups of armed men, all dressed in black.
A local reporter in Atlanta is watching this and sees these 40 or 50 men dressed in SWAT gear going up the front steps and jumps to the conclusion and says so on live TV that, well, there they go. Looks like the FBI is going to retake control of the prison.
When the detainees see the media report, they take immediate action.
They brought several hostages out to the yard. And for the benefit of our cameras, so we could see them, they brought these hostages out and they poured gasoline over them. And then they took their cigarette lighters out and began clicking whilst literally screaming at us, "If you want to assault us, go ahead. As soon as you do, we're setting fire to these men."
Without knowing it, a young journalist may have just made a mistake that could cost the lives of nearly 100 innocent people. At the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary, FBI agents negotiate with Cuban detainees who have taken over the prison. The lives of nearly 100 hostages hang in the balance. On day 3 of the standoff, a journalist's error ignites a crisis. FBI Tactical Commander Danny Colson.
All along, our negotiators have been telling the Cubans that we weren't coming in, that we wanted to negotiate and wanted them to surrender, and now a reporter is saying we're coming in.
The erroneous media report makes Special Agent D. Rosario's job even tougher as he negotiates for the lives of the hostages.
We had brought them down to such a reasonable level of emotion, and when they thought that the FBI was about to assault, they literally lost it.
We came literally within a few heartbeats of losing the hostages right then and there.
We sent everybody to what we call phase line green, which is the last position you are in before you do a rescue. It was like a spark that was about to ignite this terrible inferno of energy we had built up there.
I had to convince them that no such assault was going to take place, and that, you know, if things were going so well and so positive, why would we even think about assaulting them?
After 3 tense hours, the rioters agree to continue negotiations and spare the hostages.
We're just lucky that our negotiators were able to calm them down and we didn't have any loss of life.
For Colson, the close call is a warning sign that the standoff could explode into a full-scale riot with very little provocation. At the end of day 3, he obtains presidential approval to deploy Delta Force in a civilian crisis. The Special Operations Team arrives in Atlanta disguised as FBI agents.
There were 3 things that I desperately needed from them. The first was their breaching capability. They had all the breaching capability that would be necessary to get back into that prison to do a dynamic rescue. They had the ability to use explosives to blow steel doors down or blow locks out. They had the ability to use thermal devices to cut in an instant through steel and cable. The second thing I wanted was their sniper capability. When we went into that prison, if we had to go in, I wanted the very best snipers I could find doing cover for my men as they went in. The other thing is they have tremendous medical capability.
They travel with a complete hospital. They set up with the doctors, nurses, emergency equipment, the latest state-of-the-art everything.
If Delta Force or FBI teams engage the detainees in combat, the military hospital is prepared to treat any injury.
They can bring their doctors right in with us. They can pop a chest and do open heart surgery right there in the premises if necessary.
For the next several days, Delta Force snipers keep the detainees under constant surveillance. The rioters are working 24 hours a day, making weapons by the thousands.
There's all kinds of steel inside the prison, and they were very resourceful with the equipment. They ground weapons into spears. Each one of them must have had at least 2 weapons.
Delta Force sets up surveillance cameras all over the complex to track the movement of the detainees. Agents look for ways to get closer to the areas where the hostages are being held. If the Cuban detainees decide to kill the hostages, the tactical team must be able to launch an assault on a moment's notice.
We've got 2 people guarding the American dorm.
This is not something where you play a video game and after it's over, you hit your reset button and everybody's alive again. You're talking about the lives of human beings here, and you have a tremendous responsibility to try to get those people out.
Colson and Blakeney go back into the tunnels underneath the prison. One of the tunnels leads to the prison's electrical room. It's located right outside the American dorm, where most of the hostages are held.
We were literally on the other side of the window from inmates that were right across the walkway from where the hostages were being held. By doing that, we moved our response time from half an hour to 10 seconds. It was a tremendous leap in our capability at that point.
With the FBI SWAT teams and Delta Force in place, they will be in a better position to protect the hostages if negotiations break down.
Until they start harming a hostage, there's no reason for us to try to gain forcible entry to save these people. We therefore will wait as long as it takes.
The rioters have enough food to survive for up to a year. The day after Thanksgiving, They erect a Christmas tree on the roof of the building.
That was very disheartening to us. Maybe they didn't intend it psychologically to be that way. We interpret it as, we are going to be here through Christmas.
On day 8 of the crisis, prison guards stationed in the tunnel hear the sound of a drill. One guard recognizes the voice of Thomas Silverstein, the most vicious inmate in the federal prison system. They think Silverstein is searching for a way out.
We knew he would absolutely kill a hostage if it would help him escape.
Weldon Kennedy asks Danny Colson to go back into the tunnels to apprehend Silverstein.
So we walked down the tunnel and we did a tactical formation going down the tunnel, and we had lights on our weapons. Suddenly we noticed there was water on the floor, and then the water started getting deeper, and it was over the tops of our shoes, and then over our ankles and up to our knees. Then what we finally realized is that that tunnel was actually flooded.
The water flooding the tunnels had been dumped by National Guard helicopters to fight the fires. Looking further into the tunnel, he can see water fills it to the ceiling. He knows there is no way Thomas Silverstein can be in there.
And what they were hearing was there were tubes, ventilation tubes, that were above the water line. So the guards were actually hearing his voice, but we knew he wasn't going to get out.
Still, Colson knows that Silverstein is as dangerous inside the prison as he is on the outside.
He was a sociopath, and he'd proven he would commit murder. So had he done that, had he attempted to harm a guard or anybody else in there, it would have caused us to have to go in and launch a rescue we didn't want to have to launch. And again, we were faced with significant loss of life.
Knowing Thomas Silverstein is such a dangerous wild card, FBI negotiator D. Rosario must convince the detainees to turn him over.
United States, okay?
I emphasized and kept re-emphasizing the fact that Tommy Silverstein could become a very grave liability to the Cuban detainees and to their cause and to what they were trying to attain. I was told that they would think about it.
Rosario tells the rioters that until Silverstein is back behind bars, the hostages are in grave danger. As long as the vicious killer roams free, the standoff could come to a sudden and violent end. More than a week into the intense standoff with Cuban detainees at the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary, FBI negotiators worry that a dangerous American prisoner could jeopardize a peaceful end to the conflict.
What I suggested to them was that at some point or another, it would be in your best interest to turn Tommy Silverstein over to us.
Special Agent D. Rosario tries to convince the rioters that Silverstein is a serious threat to prison employees who are being held hostage. The American inmate is jeopardizing their position in the negotiations. A short time later, a large group of detainees appears at the Sallyport gate of the main cell block.
And there was about 100 Cubans screaming, waving their sabers in the air. And I could see they had Silverstein. And in the midst of all these screaming Cubans, they literally threw Silverstein at us.
Detainees tell agents how they captured Silverstein.
So they gained access to the pharmacy. They took some narcotic. They put it in a can of fruit cocktail, which he was known to like, and fed him fruit cocktail laced liberally with this drug, which in effect knocked him out.
The FBI viewed Silverstein's capture as an act of good faith.
That told us a lot. They don't want to hurt the hostages.
It showed the negotiators that these Cubans were responsible. They were willing to do things to cooperate with us in order to reach a common goal, which is a great step in any negotiation process.
On December 1st, a separate riot at Louisiana's Oakdale Penitentiary is resolved. The Cuban detainees incarcerated at Oakdale agree to release their hostages if the INS will review their cases.
The government of the United States, through the voice of the Attorney General, told them, you know, it's not unreasonable to give you a hearing.
D. Rosario offers the Atlanta detainees the same deal. The hostage takers have gotten exactly what they want, but still, negotiations stall. Audio surveillance reveals the rioters think the FBI will not use deadly force to remove them from the prison, that they would have a fighting chance to overpower federal forces.
The Cubans thought that the FBI and the other assets would come in with nightsticks and batons and just duke it out.
The next day, Colson decides to send the hostage takers an indelible message. The detainee agrees to talk with Colson.
And he said, I need to go to the restroom. So I said, wait right here. So I went around the barrier and I got the Marshall's SOG team and the New York City SWAT team. I got them all up and I said, put on all your gear and line up along the walls and look mean. And he walked around that barricade, and when he walked down that corridor, he literally jumped off the ground. I said, this is not going to be a nightstick duel with your swords. We're going to use deadly force.
The rioters agree to the terms of the surrender. On day 12 of the standoff, the Cuban detainees release their hostages.
I will never, ever forget those guys coming through that sally port and walking right by me, and the look of relief. They were haggard and they were tired and they were worn out, but this great sense of relief, and they were all smiling ear to ear.
When we finally walked out with hostages, not one of them having been harmed in any way, we regarded that as a huge success.
After 12 intense days, the Atlanta prison riot is over.
One of the most important things, it sort of focused the American public on the plight of the Cubans. And I think that was important. They did have a story to tell. They just told it in the wrong way.
After the riots, all detainees are granted an INS hearing. Some are released. Others with criminal records or mental disabilities are repatriated back to Cuba. The rest remain in prison. Decades before 9/11, the United States is attacked by terrorists. American businesses are bombed. Innocent people are slaughtered. Symbols of liberty become targets for destruction. The terrorists are mobile, well-organized, and deadly. As the violence escalates, their victims have but one hope: the FBI.
In the 1970s, cities across the United States became a battleground for vicious Croatian radicals. Their violent agenda targeted their own people living in America. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. Agents all over the country worked to unravel a complex web of extortions, bombings, and assassinations. At stake were the lives of innocent Croatian families trying to build a new life in America.
New York City, 1977. On the morning of June 14th, 3 men approached the Yugoslav diplomatic mission to the United Nations. Outside the mission, a New York City police officer stands guard. Inside, Yugoslav security agents protect the embassy. One of them asks the visitors for identification.
Upstairs, go, go!
Hearing the shot, police officers rush into the building. Foreign missions are technically outside the NYPD's jurisdiction. The officers are now in Yugoslav territory. As backup arrives, the officers inside the mission try to negotiate with the 3 men, but they have barricaded themselves in an upper office. The intruders warn they have taken a woman hostage. They will kill her if anyone tries to enter. One officer offers himself as a substitute hostage.
Take me for the hostage.
The gunmen refuse. Agents from the FBI's New York field office respond to the scene. According to federal law, the FBI is responsible for investigating all attacks on foreign missions. Special Agent Len Cross.
As I arrived, we had police officers in the park. We had police officers on surrounding buildings with scoped rifles. And then we had the emergency service units making entry into the building. What was going through my mind was, what was happening on the inside.
The suspects appear in an upstairs window, brandishing a Croatian flag. They toss propaganda leaflets into the street. The leaflets call on the United Nations to force communist Yugoslavia to grant Croatia its independence.
What they were trying to do was gain publicity for their cause and showing the oppressive regime that existed in Yugoslavia and how they were oppressing the Croatian people.
A hostage negotiator talks to the suspects for nearly 2 hours. They finally agree to come out, but only if they are taken into custody by U.S. authorities, not Yugoslav officials.
They were just trying to protect themselves from the officials because they knew if they got their hands on them, they'd kill them.
Easy.
And then finally, when they realized it was the New York City police and the FBI on the other side of the door and assured them that no harm would come to them, they surrendered without incident.
Move! Stay right there.
The suspects reveal that they never had a hostage. They were only bluffing to prevent Yugoslav security agents from mounting an armed assault. As the police officers escort the suspects out of the building, mission security confronts them.
Step aside, gentlemen. No, the prisoners.
They tell the officers to hand over the radicals.
This is Yugoslavian mission. You have no right here. This is territory of Yugoslavia.
Put the guns down.
The NYPD officers refuse.
Step aside.
No.
Lower your
They
weapon.
intend to leave the mission with the prisoners.
We're taking our prisoners out. Lower the guns.
The security agents finally back down. The invasion of a foreign mission on U.S. soil is unprecedented. One of their employees has been seriously wounded. Special Agent Cross now leads the investigation. He searches for a possible motive for the attack. He starts by analyzing the long history of hatred and violence between Yugoslav Serbs and Croatians as they fought over the same Eastern European lands.
The reasons and motives stretched centuries, where Serbians would go into Croatian villages and kill every man, woman, and child, and the Croatians would reciprocate.
1971. The violence spread outside Yugoslavia. Croatian radicals assassinated the Yugoslav ambassador to Sweden. In 1972, they hijacked a Swedish airliner and forced the government to release 7 political prisoners from jail. Later that same year, Croatian terrorists claimed responsibility for planting a bomb on board a Yugoslav airliner. The blast killed 26 innocent people.
I mean, the hatred was so deep and it was hard to fathom. We were dealing also with trying to understand cultural and historical issues. And it was not your simple criminal matter. It was a lot of payback on both sides.
Now, that payback is spread from Europe to the United States. It's a terrifying trend. Cross contacts fellow FBI agents at U.S. embassies around the world. They confirm that there has been a disturbing increase in Croatian attacks on Yugoslav embassies and diplomats worldwide. Special Agent Cross works closely with police and prosecutors, providing background information on the men who attacked the Yugoslav mission. 4 months later, on October 13th, a New York jury finds all 3 men guilty of conspiring to take hostage Yugoslavia's ambassador to the United Nations. The jury also convicts the gunman who wounded the Yugoslav security agent of assault with a deadly weapon. For Agent Cross, the case is officially closed. But everything he has learned tells him that Croatian terrorism in the United States is on the rise and about to explode. 9 months later, in Chicago, Cross's fears become a grim reality. Croatian businessmen begin calling the FBI in a panic. They have each received an anonymous letter written in Serbo-Croatian. The letters demand a large sum of money and threatens horrific consequences if the recipient fails to pay up. Special Agent Bjarne Borison of the FBI's Chicago field office examines the letters.
Yesterday.
Borison speaks fluent Serbo-Croatian and has a background in counterintelligence.
They said, "You are not doing your part in our cause to overthrow the communist government. We've assessed your situation and decided that you are capable of paying this amount of money." And they would instruct them to send this money to an address in Paraguay, and if you fail to do that, you'll pay the consequences. It's absolute extortion. That's the way the FBI looked at it, was, yeah, this was an extortion attempt, and they were threatening your well-being if you didn't cooperate.
Agents are unsure whether the culprits are Serb spies or Croatian criminals. But they do know the extortionists have cast a wide net. Nationwide, the FBI collects a total of 52 extortion letters from Croatian businessmen. The letters are nearly identical, but with one key exception. The senders demand a different amount of money from each victim.
Most of the people who received those extortion letters were well off, or at least comfortable individuals, and had the ability to pay that money that was requested.
In New York City, Special Agent Len Cross heads the investigation into the extortion letters. Searching for leads, he contacts Pero Vučas, a prominent Croatian political writer living in Queens.
He was known to be against violence, and we felt that he might be an individual who could perhaps assist us in terms of identifying who may be responsible for these letters.
Agent Cross asks Vučas if he thinks the extortionists could be fellow Croatians.
He did not feel any good Croatian would have written these letters and made the demands that were made in these letters.
Instead, Vučas blames the Serb government of Yugoslavia.
He told me that it was his belief that these letters were generated by the Yugoslavian intelligence service to try to disrupt the Croatian community.
The majority were peaceful, and they wanted to overthrow the Yugoslav government, but by peaceful means. But there was always those who wanted to use more violent means and would do anything to achieve that goal.
Vučas believes the letters are an attempt by Serbian spies to sabotage Croatian demands for freedom.
I left him my card, told him if you could think of anything else, please just to give me a call, and we would appreciate it.
In Chicago, Agent Borison focuses on the letter's demand to send money to a post office box in the South American country of Paraguay.
The address in Paraguay was of key significance to us because somebody had to collect that money, so you had to zero in on who that might be.
The FBI sends an agent from the U.S. Embassy in Argentina to Paraguay to investigate. the agent observes a man receiving the money. He is later identified as a known Croatian terrorist who in 1972 had shot the Yugoslav ambassador to Sweden. A month later, in New York City, the case takes a dramatic turn. A man calls local news stations claiming 2 bombs had been planted in New York City. One at the United Nations, the other at Grand Central Station. In 1978, the FBI investigates a group of Croatian terrorists who use extortion to fund their cause. In New York, 2 local television stations receive a call from a man who claims 2 bombs have been planted in New York City. One is at the United Nations. Outside a library at the UN compound, a police officer finds a suspicious-looking bag. The officer immediately calls in the NYPD bomb squad. Investigators find a note nearby written in Serbo-Croatian. It demands Croatian independence and says, quote, "This is the beginning. Our decision is kamikaze." Bomb technicians carefully dismantle the device. It's armed with dynamite and a blasting cap. The timer is set to explode within the hour.
It was designed to go off, it's just that it malfunctioned.
At Grand Central Station, police find the second bomb stashed inside a locker. Again, the device is accompanied by a letter demanding Croatian independence. If either of the devices had detonated, the loss of life and property would have been disastrous.
The writing was on the wall. Things are becoming more and more violent, and they were happening more frequently.
The FBI believes it's only a matter of time before someone is killed.
Gentlemen, go ahead, have a seat, get comfortable. So, with the contact...
Agents from the New York field office combined forces.
We felt that it would be a good idea to bring all the case agents together on one squad under one supervisor, where we could exchange and coordinate our activities.
Special Agent Cross also proposes the coordination of a nationwide effort.
If we did not, my prediction was that all hell was going to break loose.
2 weeks later, in a wealthy suburb of New York, a successful businessman is gunned down outside his own home. His only crime: he's a Croatian immigrant who refused to submit to extortion. The FBI's worst fears have been realized. An extortion target has been murdered, and agents have no viable leads. In Chicago, Special Agent Bjorn Borison becomes concerned that Croatian Americans in his area will also be targeted.
It wasn't an empty threat they made in that extortion letter. They meant it. And we didn't know who they'd come after, so we had to contact all those individuals who'd received those letters to warn them and advise them they could be a possible target. And at the same time, try to identify who's responsible.
The FBI also alerts other law enforcement agencies to watch for anyone purchasing illegal weapons or bomb-making materials. A few days later, the Chicago field office receives a call from the Department of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. A known Croatian radical is trying to buy dynamite.
And they had just got an individual in a sting operation who had purchased 2 cases of dynamite from them. This individual met with the ATF undercover agents thinking he was buying real dynamite, but they actually sold him dummy dynamite.
The buyer's name is Ivo Afinic. He is a high-ranking member of a Croatian independence group called Otpor.
Obviously, they have plans to do a lot more bombs, and that's why they were buying this. The name of the organization is Hrvatski Narodni Otpor, which means Croatian National Resistance. So the word Otpor means resistance.
While the majority of Otpor members are law-abiding citizens, The FBI suspects that there may be a criminal faction operating within the organization intent on extorting and murdering fellow Croatians.
All right, guys, we're gonna pop this door. We're gonna go in. We got some
Otpor meets at a Croatian social club on the south side of Chicago. In a joint operation, FBI and ATF agents raid the club, searching for bomb-making materials. Investigators find the 2 cases of fake dynamite. But there are no live explosives anywhere in the club. A thorough search fails to turn up enough evidence to press charges against Ivo Afinic. That same day, in a nearby Chicago neighborhood, Daniel Nikolic opens up his shop. Nikolic is one of dozens of Croatian-American businessmen who have received an extortion letter. The cabinet maker refused to be bullied. Chicago police, the Chicago Fire Department, ATF agents, and the FBI investigate.
We did a search of the premises, and we determined that a bomb had been detonated on the roof of the cabinet shop.
Special Agent Borison interviews Daniel Nikolic.
There was no doubt who he thought was responsible, and that was the Otpor leadership, as a result of his failure to pay the extortion letter that he received.
With Nikolic's help, the FBI talks to members of the Croatian community. Their top priority is to find a confidential informant inside Otpor, familiar with the organization's violent activities.
Leaders in the Croatian Cultural Center.
The key to almost any investigation is you have to develop someone inside the organization who's willing to cooperate with you.
But the Chicago FBI has trouble finding anyone who will talk about Otpor.
About the Serbian activity.
To get someone that was actually inside the group is very hard, because it wasn't that big a group who was actually responsible for the violence. It was a small group, and it's very difficult to find someone inside that small group who's going to cooperate with you.
While agents try to recruit an informant in Chicago, Pasadena, California becomes the group's next target. On the morning of November 22nd, a Croatian businessman steps outside his home and into the gun sights of an assassin. The victim had received an extortion letter 5 months earlier, but he refused to support the Otpor cause. Local police and the FBI investigate, but they find little evidence. In San Francisco, home to a large Croatian-American population, agents mount an all-out effort to penetrate Otpor before they kill again. The FBI assigns Special Agent Bob Gorth, who speaks fluent Serbo-Croatian, to the full-time task of recruiting a confidential informant.
The FBI was having a problem with penetrating the Croatian community for the same reason that you have trouble in any ethnic terrorist field. The criminal act is a result of their nationalism. Whether or not they're involved, they will stand together as a community against law enforcement.
With a background in Yugoslavian counterintelligence, Special Agent Gorth understands the bitter conflict between the Croatians and the Serbs.
Not as often as I...
Yugoslavia was an artificial country. It was born after World War I. The Croatians fundamentally were constantly fighting to get out from under what they considered Serb domination.
His understanding of the culture helps him enter San Francisco's Croatian community.
I was very un-bureau in a way. No suit and tie, no anything. A lot of times conversations were over a beer, over a bar table. We had to find a way to break down the wall and to convince someone on the inside who had information that what they were doing was morally wrong. It had to be a matter of conscience and a matter of actual conversion of thought.
From San Francisco to Chicago to New York, FBI agents compare notes, trying to find an insider who can give them any information on the mysterious, tight-knit terror group. The FBI's lead case agent in New York is Len Cross.
It was about 6 o'clock at night, and we were going over our leads and trying to get an idea, what do we need to do next? And I received a phone call.
Agent Cross, it's for you. He wouldn't say. It sounded urgent.
After 4 months of silence, Pero Vučas, the Croatian activist writer, is desperate to talk to Cross.
Croatian writer from Queens. You got a what?
He says, I need to talk to you, and I need to talk to you now. I got a threatening letter, and he says, I'm going to tell you everything. I know who's all responsible.
The call may be the break the FBI needs.
So I says, okay, I'm coming right over. I says, I'll meet you right at your house.
As soon as I can. All right, this evening, thank you. Okay, all right. You got a threatening letter?
Other agents from the New York field office accompany Cross to the meeting.
They says, no, you're not going, we're going to go with you, because I mean, this could be a setup. They could be trying to get you.
Nationwide, FBI agents try to infiltrate a deadly terrorist organization that extorts and murders their fellow Croatian immigrants. Pero Vučas, a Croatian political writer, asks Special Agent Len Cross to come to his house. He's finally willing to talk.
He was very concerned, very scared, and he proceeded to show me this letter. It was essentially telling him that if he didn't shut up and didn't get his act together, that something very bad was going to happen to him. He realized at this point that these guys meant business and that he was in their crosshairs, and that his only alternative was to reach out to the FBI, put his trust in them that they can get the job done.
The writer tells Agent Cross that he believes members of Otpor are behind the letters and the violence.
And he says they're criminals, so just a bunch of criminals that have infiltrated the Croatian organizations. At that point, he laid it out who all the king players were throughout the country. He couldn't tell us who wrote their letters, but what he did tell us is these are the guys that are running the whole operation.
According to Vučas, Otpor's North American headquarters is in Chicago. Some of the key terrorists live in the Midwestern United States.
It was really good information and definitely kind of was starting to fill in the puzzle.
In Milwaukee, Wisconsin, agents contact a Croatian priest who the FBI learns is influential throughout the Midwestern Croatian community.
Sit down.
Father Bradish is an outspoken opponent of violence. Agents believe he may provide valuable leads. An FBI agent from the Milwaukee field office interviews him at the Catholic elementary school where he works. As they talk, Father Bradish opens his mail. One package contains a book. The agent spots a wire.
He observed batteries, wires, and explosives. The agent, being concerned for the location, that it was in an elementary school with young kids, grabbed the book and he ran outside.
The Milwaukee police sends a bomb technician to disable the device. Tragically, the blasting cap explodes, taking off part of the technician's hand. The FBI issues a warning to the 52 extortion victims that they've identified across the country. Beware of book-sized packages wrapped in brown paper. The next day, in Queens, New York, Pero Vučas picks up his mail. Inside his post office box, he finds a note telling him that he has a package. The postal worker can't find it.
No, please, would you look one more time? It has to be here.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
The package has been stored on a shelf near the counter.
There you go. Which package right there?
It looks like a book.
I don't want it. I'll come back for it later.
Vučas contacts Special Agent Len Cross.
I received a call telling me I've got a bomb. It's at the post office. He says, you want me to go get it? I says, no, leave it there. I says, we're going to get the bomb squad. We'll take it from there.
At the FBI lab, a bomb expert studies the package. It is nearly identical to a device sent to Milwaukee.
This book bomb was very similar in construction. The cutout looked the same. The firing system was the same. It was the same type of dynamite, same type of blasting cap.
The postmarks on the packaging reveal that both bombs were mailed from Akron, Ohio, on the same day. Agents alert Ohio authorities of the likelihood that the bomb maker lives in their area. In Cleveland, police search the home of Pavel Chotoras. The Croatian radical is their chief suspect in the bombing of a Croatian bookstore 5 days earlier.
Spread it out a little bit.
Special Agent Bjarne Borison.
During the search, they found a book that was hollowed out and was obviously a book bomb.
The bomb is a prototype. Once again, there are no live explosives on the premises. Without further evidence, no arrest can be made. Investigators try to link the prototype to the book bombs mailed to Milwaukee and Queens.
Every bomb maker has his own unique style. And of course, one of the reasons for doing that is safety. You want to do it the same way every time, because if you've changed anything, it's very dangerous to wire a book bomb.
In the lab, Special Agent Denny Klein compares all three devices. Each book is hollowed out to the same depth. The glue and solder used to construct the devices each have the same chemical composition. Even minute tool marks on the bomb's wiring match.
The belief of the laboratory was that this was a prototype that was used to make the two earlier bombs.
There is no way to know how many more bombs have been constructed from the prototype. March 17th, 1980. New Yorkers and tourists pack Fifth Avenue to watch the city's annual St. Patrick's Day parade. 10:55 a.m. A bomb explodes at the 30th floor office of a Yugoslav bank. FBI agents respond, including Special Agent Ken Maxwell.
We were doing interviews of the employees of the bank, the employees of the neighboring offices, the maintenance people in the building, delivery people, anybody who would even come remotely close to 505th Avenue that day.
The only significant evidence agents find is another note in which Otpor claims responsibility. The terrorists issue a chilling threat. The bomb attacks will continue until Croatia is free. On June 3rd, 1980, the terrorists target one of America's most cherished symbols of freedom, the Statue of Liberty. On June 3rd, 1980, Croatian terrorists target one of America's most cherished symbols of freedom, the Statue of Liberty. Special Agent Ken Maxwell helps investigate the bombing.
Someone had gotten into what they call the museum story room at the base of the statue that tells you the whole history of how the statue was built and all of the wonderful history in the pictures, and plus a souvenir shop. All of that had been blown to smithereens. A considerable amount of damage had been done throughout the base of the statue.
A number of violent groups claim responsibility for the bombing, including the Palestinian Liberation Organization, anti-Castro Cubans, and even neo-Nazis.
Multiple claims of credit back in the early 80s was not an unusual phenomenon.
Investigators painstakingly search for pieces of the bomb, expecting that the evidence will help them determine which group is responsible.
Hey guys, looks like I got a wire over here.
We spent all night there sifting through all of the rubble and debris and came up with quite a few components. The components of the improvised explosive device were strikingly similar to previous Croatian-related bombings.
What began as an attempt to extort dozens of Croatian Americans has escalated into a campaign of violence.
The Statue of Liberty was the greatest symbol of attraction for potential terrorists because of what it stood for. In their mind, the United States was not listening to their cause. So let's bring the cause to their attention and let's show them, the United States, that this is a real issue to us, and almost trying to extort the United States of America to help them achieve independence.
But the terrorists' logic is flawed. The attack only fuels authorities to intensify their investigation.
Nice. Bombing our Statue of Liberty, it's a slap in the face. So what we did, we started to focus our resources, our investigative attention on several individuals who we strongly suspected were involved in this kind of activity.
In New York, the FBI sets up intensive surveillance on several key terror suspects. In San Francisco, FBI Special Agent Bob Gorth continues his efforts to recruit an informant inside the terrorist ring.
But I spent over a year doing nothing but contacting Croatians. It's very important to understand the people, to speak their language, to understand where they come from, even to a degree to empathize with them, so that you can talk to them in terms that they understand and appreciate. I interviewed over 300, I think, of all stripes and persuasions and types, trying to find the right source. I finally found a man who indicated he'd like to talk again. Hadn't told me anything, but he'd like to talk again. After talking to him, I don't know how many times, we began to build a rapport. And finally he said, I think I'll help.
Finding a source of information inside Otpor is a major break for the FBI. After thoroughly debriefing the informant in San Francisco, the FBI sends him to New York to gather intelligence on the most recent Croatian bombings.
He originally had lived in New York, and he was well acquainted with the people.
The informant renews old friendships with Croatian radicals.
He would have been killed if members of Otpor Command had found out that he was the man.
Despite the risk, he probes for details about their plans.
If you could obtain inside information on what's going on in a criminal enterprise, it means a tremendous amount in terms of achieving success in an investigation.
The informant learns that the group intends to assassinate an outspoken critic of Otpor.
Take care of him.
The target is Pero Vučas, the prominent Croatian political writer.
They were going to kill him with a rifle as he was walking his daughter, his 6-year-old daughter, to school in the morning. If they missed, they could hit his 6-year-old daughter. They had no concern for her, and most of the agents and the detectives working this case, they all had kids. So, you know, they're thinking in terms of a father. How could they do such a thing like this?
According to the informant, the ruthless plot is already in motion. Special Agent Ken Maxwell watches as 2 suspected terrorists park a van near the target's home.
What was very unusual is that they got out of the front of the van and went in the back of the van and removed one of the rear windows and substituted one of the windows with a cardboard panel. And although we could not see totally inside the van, we did know they weren't having a bagel and coffee in the back of that van. They were looking to assassinate him.
In New York, agents believe Croatian assassins intend to shoot Pero Vučas as he walks his 6-year-old daughter to school. Vučas has been working with the FBI to identify the terrorists. Special Agent Len Cross warns Vučas to stay inside his apartment.
If they had made an attempt to get out of the car and proceed to his residence, then we saw what would appear to be a weapon. There was no ifs, ands, or buts. They were going to be taken down, period.
Fortunately, Vučas and his daughter remain hidden, forcing the snipers to abandon their deadly plot. The FBI decides to set up electronic surveillance on a man they believe to be the mastermind behind the East Coast bombings, the president of Otpor, Stjepan Sajic.
He was directing the operations here in New York, and naturally would be the place to put the wiretap, especially in view of the fact that the individuals came to him, and that's where they had their meetings.
Special Agent Bjarne Borison.
It's very difficult to go into a building and place a wire without leaving any trace that you were there, and the FBI is quite good at that.
What are they talking about?
Very nearby, we set up a listening post, and we'd have at least one translator there at all times.
Their job is to translate Croatian to English,
Pieces are the bomb making.
as well as identify each voice on the tape. They must also decipher any code words used by the terrorists.
They won't come out and say words like dynamite. They may say things or pieces.
The drop-off, which is the device delivery, and the package is the bomb.
It took a while for us to get a grasp as to what are they talking about and get the significance of the phraseology they used.
The conspirators meet often, usually in the rec room in Sacic's basement. Jako Drevan, one of the men who tried to assassinate Pero Vučas, is Sacic's lieutenant. Translators work day and night, analyzing their conversations.
The wiretap would run 24 hours a day, and we had to constantly monitor the conversations because they're talking about bombing, assassinating people.
Agents are still trying to pin down specifics, places, dates, the identities of the co-conspirators.
It was all part of the puzzle that had all the pieces be pulled together in order to form enough evidence to start the prosecution.
Under federal racketeering laws, the FBI needs hard evidence of a conspiracy to take down the entire organization. Special Agent Ken Maxwell.
One particular night, their shaking of the pinball machine shook loose a wire that was used in the installation of the microphone.
Stop.
It looked like a plain wire. It didn't look like it had a head that a normal microphone would have. So if you saw it, you might even know what it is.
On the other end, the translators can hear the conspirators talking about the wire.
What they were saying was, what is that? And one of them realized rather quickly, because he had done all of the electrical work for the house, I didn't put that wire there.
They knew there was something there that didn't belong there. Now, the next question is, do they know what it is?
The conspirators begin following the wire.
And they traced that wire out of the basement to the power source out on the street and ripped the wire out.
For the FBI, the tap is critical.
To the great credit of our special operations folks, they reinstalled, and they reinstalled within 24 hours. I think the bad guys thought they had won in that instance, not realizing our persistence. And this time, we avoided the pinball machine.
Agents hear Stepan Sacic and Jako Drevan planning an upcoming operation.
They were talking about, let's get ready, I want you to do this, I want you to smash this. And we knew they were getting ready to bomb something.
Agents learn that Opor intends to bomb a Yugoslav dance studio, scheduled to host a gala attended by the Yugoslav ambassador to the United Nations. Special Agent Len Cross.
They were going to have over 300 people there. At this point, this really raised our concerns because now they're going after groups and not concerned about who gets hurt.
Agents tail Drevan. He drives to Bridgeport, Connecticut, where he visits the home of a man named Vuka Julic.
When he went into the residence, he went in empty-handed. When he came out, he had a good-sized brown bag, and there seemed to be some bulky stuff inside the bag.
Agents follow Drevan back to New York City, where he picks up another Otpur foot soldier. The men drive on toward their target.
And they circled a block in Manhattan and kept circling it and circling it.
Agents watch as Drevin cases the building. He leaves the suspicious bag behind in the van.
It was decided that if they removed the bag, then we were going to arrest them. Certainly we were not going to take the chance of a potential bombing in Midtown Manhattan.
As the suspect returns to the van, the agents watch his every move, ready to take the terrorists down. In New York, agents tail 2 suspected Croatian terrorists. An FBI surveillance operation has revealed that a radical faction of Otpor is planning to place a bomb at a reception for 300 people. The terrorists case the building and then leave the area. Agents suspect that they have a bomb in their van. The FBI cannot risk a terror attack on hundreds of innocent people. Agents obtain search warrants to raid the homes of Stepan Sacic and Jako Drevin.
FBI! Up against the wall! Hold it! Hold it right there! Get out! Get out! Hold it right there! Hold it right there! Hold it right there! Come on! We have warrant for your arrest. What is this? I don't understand. Just hold it right there. Hold it.
In Drevin's home, Special Agent Ken Maxwell finds a familiar-looking bag in a closet.
When I looked into the shopping bag, I saw a woman's pocketbook that was open. And inside the pocketbook were sticks of dynamite wrapped up in tape, a timing device, an alarm clock, an electric blasting cap, and wire. It's not every day that you find a bomb at your feet.
Authorities take Drevin into custody. Across town, Special Agent Len Cross and his team search the home of Stepan Sacic, the president of Otpor.
One of my team members was going through a pile of paint drop cloths, and he found the scoped rifle, and he found the ammunition.
Investigators suspect Sacic's co-conspirators used the rifle weeks earlier in a plot to murder political writer and FBI cooperator Pero Vučas. Agents arrest Sacic for conspiracy under RICO, the federal racketeering statute.
He was advised of his rights, and he refused. He wasn't being very cooperative.
No, I don't think so.
4 days later, FBI agents and police raid the Bridgeport, Connecticut home of Vuka Julic.
Towards the window. What is all about? Face the window.
Julic provided Drevin with the bomb earmarked for the dance studio.
We have a warrant to search the premises.
A bomb tech, as he moved some clothes, observed there on the floor in a bag considerable amount of dynamite, and sitting on top of the dynamite were electric blasting caps, live electric blasting caps.
Agents arrest Vuka Julic.
Don't you worry about it. We'll take care of it from here.
Special Agent Cross, you haven't heard it.
They call Special Agent Cross in New York to inform him they have found one of Otpor's primary bomb makers.
Special Agent Cross.
Cross again questions Stepan Sacic, asking him if he knows a man by the name of Vuka Julic.
You know a guy from Bridgeport?
He says, yeah, a little I do. I says, you got some problems. And we've just arrested him. And I says, he had a large quantity of explosives and caps and weapons in his house.
Sacic still refuses to talk.
There you are.
New York investigators call in Special Agent Bob Gorth from San Francisco to question Julic. The former Otpor member turned confidential informant accompanies him. Late in the afternoon, With the moral support of the Croatian cooperator, Ulic finally begins to open up.
He wanted the feeling that a fellow Croatian believed in him, trusted him, and he wouldn't be entirely alone. And when he finally got the courage up, he said, yeah, I want to talk about it. And of course, that was the linchpin of the whole case.
Vuka Ulic tells investigators how other Otpor members convinced him to kill a Croatian community leader in California 2 years earlier.
After drinking all one evening and into the morning, he decided he'd strike a blow for Croatian freedom and go kill this enemy of the people. So he did. And later on, he realized that what he'd done was not advancing the Croatian cause, but really was harming it. He was one of the few people that I firmly believe regretted what he did.
Ulic agrees to testify against Sacic, Dreven, and the other Croatian terrorists.
When I killed.
This is the key testimony prosecutors need to take down the entire terrorist ring.
His cooperation in this case was instrumental in breaking the back of an organized crime organization wherein in 4 cities we literally took out the godfathers of 4 families.
The RICO statute, originally enacted to stop organized crime, is used for the first time to fight terrorism. Within 2 years, 11 members of the Otpor organization are convicted and sentenced to up to 40 years in prison.
If you're going to achieve any kind of success in terrorism, you have to be able to bring to the playing field the right kind of players, the right kind of knowledge, and the right kind of resource, if you even hope to put a dent into it.
The Rambo approach is not going to win over terrorists. Terrorists are motivated by an extreme sense of nationalism. And if you're going to deal with them, you've got to get into their hearts and minds. Otherwise, you may stop them on a particular incident, but you haven't changed their minds. If you don't change their minds, they'll do it again.
For the FBI and law enforcement nationwide, dismantling Otpor was a vital achievement. Terrorists operating inside U.S. borders were stopped dead in their tracks.